Well everybody, my YouTuber chums and I are always talking about how to make a video a success. And it's not quite as easy as you might think. It's not just a case of getting a nice fancy Ferrari, driving it about a bit and calling it a day. No. To get people to really tune in, you need a hook. You need a great thumbnail and a great catchy title. Sometimes these things just write themselves, other times it's a little more complicated. But with this car, I've got so much choice. I could call it BMW's biggest mistake, the best car you'll never buy, AutoTrader's biggest bargain, the one the Germans got wrong, or maybe even, one of my personal favourites, the cheapest supercar you'll ever own. Although, it's not a supercar, is it? But you know what? On balance, I think to play it safe, I'm going to call this Matt Armstrong buys broken Ferrari F50. Yes, that'll do. Anyway, today I am driving for the first time the BMW i8 Roadster. And as it happens, it's a very interesting car. Time I see an i8 out and about, which, let's face it, is still something of an event, I am shocked to remember that as a production car, these are now nearly 10 years old. Yes, the Roadster only landed in 2018, but it shares its core design, missing roof aside, with the coupe that landed back in 2013, going on sale in 2014. It evolved from the old BMW Vision Dynamics concept, which actually you can see very clearly was the setup for the i8. I actually then recall seeing what was, I think by the time, called the i8 concept, a much closer to production version of this car, at the lobby of BMW over in Munich, and I've got to say, it wowed me then and it wows me now. The only real difference I can recall between that and this, beyond the usual minor production-ready tweaks, was the fact that had some McLaren Senna-style clear door pockets here, which were pretty cool. Regardless, from the off, the i8 was always a car that I think somewhat confused people, because just to look at it, you would say this is every inch supercar. 10 years on, it's still a dramatic thing, and you know, I think if any BMW of the modern age has the potential to become a genuine future classic, it's probably this one. But as this was a car designed to be all about looking forwards rather than backwards, rather than the traditional supercar power plant of a nice high-revving, naturally aspirated engine, this instead went for a hybrid setup. Bear in mind, back in 2013, the word hybrid generally conjured up images of a Prius and just about nothing else. The idea of a sexy one was still a very foreign concept. Honda tried it with the CRZ, but it didn't really work. So, at the back here, you have a 1.5 litre, 3-cylinder, producing 230 horsepower, and that is a very close relative of that you'd find in the then new Mini. Up front, you then have an electric motor making about 130 horsepower of its own, and a battery pack of about 7.5 kilowatt hours that gave you a rough electric-only range of, I think, 15 miles, give or take. The chassis was arguably even more radical, because the car was built on a carbon fibre tub, which even today is still a very exotic way of doing things. It's not the prettiest thing to behold. A VW XL1's chassis, by comparison, was, I think, a little nicer to look at. The finish here being just a little bit more rough and ready and maybe prototype looking, but that I think has an appeal all of its own. The car also had, again, rather unusually for a BMW, double wishbone suspension at the front and a multi-link at the rear. The gearbox was then a 6-speed torque converter automatic, and on account of the fact that no matter how many times they tried to rejig the tests to make them more fair, they never did, the claimed fuel economy here was something like 130 miles to the gallon. Some tests, I think, actually showed even more, but honestly, they can be safely ignored. In any case, the car will actually do, if you want it to, about 40 to the gallon, and I can tell you, it's also pretty quick. The last time I drove one of these was not long after, or even during the time, I had my Lotus Evora 400. And that was a car that had 400 horsepower, as you might imagine, so a smidge more than this, and weighed about 100 kilos less than the coupe. In theory, you would think then that would make the Lotus the quicker car. But no, not at all. Put your foot down in this, and it's good. Having driven both, I can assure you this is no slouch, and certainly quicker than the Lotus ever felt. But impressive numbers and turn of pace aside, the i8 for me always had a few major failings. The first of which was the fact that, for me, the interior failed to live up to the expectations set by the exterior. On the outside, it's still a super modern looking car, but in here, it feels largely like just about any other BMW of the day. Sure, you've got a digital display here and another one up here, but by modern standards, both actually feel, well, quite tiny. And sure, you've got these gorgeous butterfly doors, but once you're inside the car, you can't notice them, and they're actually quite awkward to get in and out of these things, particularly in coupe guise. They don't sound especially brilliant. I mean, it makes a noise, but it's not one that anybody would choose to listen to. And in coupe form, they have two, I think, essentially useless back seats. I think they were really designed to appeal only to people that have children, preferably small ones, and my friend Ben from Dad Cars, I'm sure, would love to have an i8 on his channel. But for me, the biggest issue with the i8, and one of the reasons I never bought one, was the fact that the boot was piddly. Absolutely awful. There is no storage up the front. All you've got is this little cubby hole at the back that feels like you might just about get one airport carry-on in it. And so you wind up in this situation where the nice, eco-friendly, everyday usable hybrid BMW is actually less practical than a lightweight, stripped-out hardcore Ferrari, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever. You then had the issue that the car was quick, but when it came to a bend, it wasn't really all that keen to go around it, because in this baffling quest to achieve some sort of eco-credentials, BMW fitted it with tyres that were too narrow and, to be honest, just not good enough. This has two 1.5 section wide items at the front, and they are Bridgestone Potenza S001s. They're just not good enough for doing this sort of stuff, driving about normally in, comfort mode and whatnot with automatic engage. They're perfectly fine, and you know what? The car is comfy, it's decent and everything else. But I know for a fact, chuck it into a bend and this thing will understeer like people tell you an old Audi does. It just doesn't compute. It's again another element that doesn't match the expectations set by the looks, and also the performance when you put your foot down. The final nail then in the coffin was the criminal depreciation these suffered, and I really don't know whether it's a result of the pricing, £115,000 for the coupe, or the fact that, yeah, 370 horsepower is decent, but not for 115 grand. The borderline unusable seats in the back that aren't really any better than those you'd get in an Aston or a 911, or maybe the fact that people just didn't want to pay for a BMW badge. But I seem to recall that these lost something terrifying in the first sort of, not even year, but 6 months. I remember seeing them in the showroom for like 70 odd grand when they weren't even a year old. That's nuts. Even more baffling was the fact BMW waited until 2018 before they made this, the Roadster. And what's particularly baffling is that, having driven it now, this is the car it should have always been. What I really don't get is that despite the fact they built a sports car on a carbon fibre tub, and part of the reason you do that is for extra rigidity, apparently they never anticipated building one of these as a Roadster. This is in spite of the fact that one of the concepts for it was a Roadster. BMW don't really know how to do sports cars, and when you hear about stuff like this, it really does show. The proof, if it were required, that the car wasn't built as a Roadster comes in the fact that despite it is a carbon fibre tub and they are inherently fairly rigid, they still did a fair bit of bracing to the chassis to stiffen it up for the transition. This added a bit of weight, so where the regular car is already actually impressively light considering what's going on at about 1,550 kilos, this is about 1,650. Helping make up for this in a very small way was the fact that for 2018, so from the introduction of the Roadster onwards, BMW gave the electric side of the hybrid system a bit of a reworking. So you've got a slightly larger battery, now giving you 11.5 kilowatt hour of capacity, which means your real world electric only range goes up to 20 something or other miles, and you've also got a little more power from the motors too. only about 12 horses or so, bringing the grand total up to about 370. The thing you feel more is the torque figure, which is about 420 pound-foot. That's 540 newton meters. In other words, a lot. And I've got to say, because of those twin power systems working together, it does respond pretty well. The back seats were another casualty of the conversion, though I have to say I really don't mind that at all, and if anything, it really adds to the specialness of this car. Having just the two seats, far less behind you, and the wind in your hair, oh, it ramps up the experience quite a bit. They also gave the car a frankly brilliant roof system. Yes, it is made out of denim, which is as odd looking as it is sounding, but you know what? The mechanism is fantastic. Smooth, elegant, and full of the sort of theatrics you want from a car like this. They also mercifully did go to some effort to retain the butterfly doors, another bit of much appreciated theatre. And with the roof down, which you can do from the key, it makes getting into one of these much easier. The seats themselves are okay. I mean, they look nice enough and they're pretty comfy, and to be honest, the whole car is really very usable. Rubbish space aside for the boot and now absence of rear seats, I could drive this very happily over a long distance. I'd love to do a road trip in it if I could take all my stuff, which I can't. Its owner, Adam, is a bit of a serial car guy, and honestly, in that regard, makes me look like a rank amateur. In his time, he has had hundreds of them, and this is his third i8. The first was a coupe, then followed by a Roadster, each of which were black and white. And one of the unusual things about this particular car is it's not black on black as I first thought, but instead grey on black. And this to me takes away a little bit from the really striking styling that the car has, but to be honest, the shape is bold enough, it can still pull it off. It's still a good looking thing. Me, I'd probably have it in either the white or that blue that I think a lot of them were specified in, even if they did look a little bit like they were giving birth to a 911. Despite having gone through a whole bunch of different cars, including the famous Ferrari 345 series, so that's 355, 456 and 550, he has found that the i8 provides a rather compelling combination of qualities: supercar looks, sports car performance, and hatchback running costs. Everything that I know of the cars tells me that really is true. And honestly, today, I'm not really even that fussed by the cornering performance either. You can feel that it's not quite as good as it really could be, and indeed it's very telling that when AC Schnitzer got their hands on one of these, they didn't touch the powertrain, because I think really there probably wasn't anything they could actually do. These are fairly complicated things to get working at all, let alone then modify. Instead, all their work was either cosmetic or in the handling department, and most people generally agree that just sticking some bigger, wider and slightly meatier rubber on this transforms it. I can see exactly why that would. I've put it in e-drive mode now because we're in town and I can. So all we have for power is the single motor up the front. Unlike many other hybrids, there is just the one. And you know what? It's not really much of an issue. To be honest, most times, even when you are in a car that can do proper torque vectoring, it's not something you really feel unless you're in quite extreme situations. For the vast majority of buyers of this car, I think it really would have been ultimately pointless. It does mean this is, technically speaking, all-wheel drive too, though with the weight distribution of a mid-engine car, I'm not entirely sure it'd be that much fun in the snow. In any case, it's now a beautiful, serene thing, very calming, and really a lovely way to enjoy a fabulous day like this. Look, I love a cracking power plant as much as, if not maybe slightly more than the next girl, but I also appreciate these little moments, this little bit of silence. I had the Ferrari 296 last week, and I wound up driving that in electric mode quite a few times as well, because, well, it's just pleasant. I then appreciate the fact you can just press a button, have the engine kick back in, and on you go. It's wonderful. This, of course, also means that, unlike a full electric car, you're not going to suffer from range anxiety, all that sort of stuff. In fact, it's even congestion charge exempt too. So then, gripes. Yes, I do have a few. Are you surprised? First off, not massively roomy, this cabin. Despite the fact you now have no rear seats whatsoever, I do feel fairly claustrophobic in here. I'm glad that the roof is down. With it up, it would be very cramped indeed. There also is evidently an element of scuttle shake in here. I can't really feel it, but my camera can. I can hear it rattling about a lot. It only does that in cars where the windscreen is wobbling all over the place. And I apologise if you can hear it, but it's the that doing that. It's, yeah, you're going back down there. I appreciate the fact there are still a couple of sort of cup holders and the like in here, and that is very nice. The stereo is decent too, and of course the infotainment is very good. Bit old now, but it's BMW iDrive. It was always one of the best. Visibility then, not so great. This A-pillar is very, very big, but luckily it's close enough to you, it shouldn't be too much of an issue. However, your passenger side is not great. The A-pillar over there, combined with the wing mirror, gives you a chunky blind spot, and that sort of hump for the back, that's not so good either. You cannot see a lot. Straight out the back is fine. You've got parking sensors, camera, all that sort of stuff. So, you know, for around town and everything, it's okay. I would be somewhat concerned about scuffing the front, but honestly, compared to a lot of other actual supercars, it's not all that bad. The other big issue I've had previously with these cars is the gearbox. Today, I haven't had a problem with it, and there's a good possibility that they did improve things. But when I drove the car last, in coupe guise, and an older model, in town, it was a little bit lethargic, and there were moments where the whole thing just didn't feel like it really wanted to get off the line, which for a hybrid with quite a bit of power out of the electric system, it's just not right. In its defence though, today I've had absolutely no problem. I've been driving it chiefly in manual and sports mode, and honestly, it's pretty good. In the Roadster, you'd also get a little bit of buffeting in the cabin. Not masses, but it's there. It's not quite as well insulated from outside forces as some other cars. In terms of dynamics, the biggest problem I think I'm actually noticing today is instead of a lack of grip from the front, it's a lack of keenness to turn in. It does give you sort of vague front-wheel drive car with a bit too much power vibes, which I suppose does make a little bit of sense. That sort of initial like inch of turn or so, the car doesn't really feel like it wants to cooperate. Then once it has weighted up, it becomes a little bit easier to persuade. Overall pace though, I've got no trouble whatsoever. And the brakes, they're nice, easy to modulate. As BMW items go, they're decent. Yeah, there you can feel it. It washed wide a little bit actually, and then tried to brake from the rear, only subtly, but you can feel the weight moving about quite a bit. Yeah. Put your foot down in a bend, it does not like it at all. And I just think it's such a shame. BMW should have just committed, just give us a proper hybrid supercar. Hang the economy figures, give us at least a 4-cylinder engine, more power, make the total 500 horses or so. You could have done it. Oh yeah, that's not elegant around that bend. You've got the looks, make the interior a bit more dramatic, stick another 20-30 grand on the price, because let's be honest here, anyone spending £135,000 as these Roadsters were on a car isn't really going to care about 30 or 40 mpg. They're just not. They probably cared more about the tax breaks it bought, and I think that's why these were quite popular for company car buyers. Allegedly, BMW themselves were surprised by the fact they managed to shift 20,000 i8s over the near 10 years they were in production. It's a shame really that sort of COVID came along and knackered the last couple of years, because I would really like to have seen the car get a proper run-out model, an MI8 or something. Anyway, probably never going to happen, was it? The best news though is that today these are now a proper bargain. The coupe starts, are you ready, at 30,000 quid. The Roadsters, because they're later, newer cars, a little bit more desirable and quite a bit rarer, they're a bit more. But they start at 55 grand. And while for most people I'm sure a 911 is going to be far more appealing for the money, if you're looking to buy a car that's got the whole exotic feel about it, but you don't want exotic running costs, ooh, you're going to struggle to do better than this. I haven't really even heard of any big deal-breaking serious issues that these have over the years. I mean, a lot of other cars, including a whole bunch of BMWs, you mention it, you go, oh, E46 M3 or E92 M3 or E60 M5, people go, oh, wait, hang on a minute, oh, rod bearings or oh, subframes, or there's always something. But with the i8, there's not. I need to drive an i3 now. I keep getting told they're really, really good, but I've never had the pleasure. So if you've got one of those and you'd like to see it on the channel, please do send me an email. In any case, all that remains to be said is a big thank you to Adam for bringing this out, and a big hello to his petrol-head son Joshua, who's starting his own YouTube channel, and apparently has been doing okay thus far. So good luck to you, Joshua, and from me to you, get a proper job. No, seriously, follow your dreams until you get to 18, then get a proper job. Only kidding. It's great to see young enthusiasts out there. It really, really does warm my cold heart. Anyway, to the rest of you, a big thanks for tuning in, and as ever, don't forget, hit the like button, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.